Two neighbors buy the exact same house on the exact same street for the exact same $300,000 with the exact same down payment. Hannah signs a 15-year mortgage. Diego signs a 30-year mortgage. That's the only difference between them, one number on one line of the paperwork. And over the next few decades, that single choice will send their two financial lives spinning in completely opposite directions. One of them will save well over $200,000 in interest. The other might quietly end up richer anyway. And both of them are absolutely convinced they made the smarter move. So today, we're going to run the real math on 15 versus 30, all the way down, because the answer flips, not once but twice, and by the end, you're going to know exactly which one you should sign. Let's keep this honest, because this is one of the biggest financial decisions most people will ever make, and they usually make it in about 4 seconds based on the monthly payment alone. So we're giving Hannah and Diego the same everything. Same house, same price, same down payment, same income, same $300,000 loan. The only thing we're changing is the length of the mortgage. No emotion, no dogma, just what each choice actually does to the money. And I want you to genuinely play along here because you almost certainly have a mortgage or you're going to get one, and this is the exact fork you'll be standing at. Let's walk through it. Start with what the term actually changes because it changes 3 things at once, and most people only ever look at the first one. The first thing is the monthly payment. Hannah's 15-year loan crams the same $300,000 into half the time, so her monthly payment is noticeably higher, maybe $500 or $600 a month more than Diego's. That's the part everyone sees, and it's why so many people flinch and sign the 30. But the second thing the term changes is the interest rate itself, and this one is quieter. Lenders almost always give you a lower rate on a 15-year loan, often a good fraction of a percent lower because they get their money back faster and take on less risk. So Hannah isn't just paying faster, she's paying at a cheaper rate the whole way. And the third thing, the one that hides at the very bottom of the paperwork where nobody reads, is the total interest. And that number is where this whole video lives. So let's actually look at it because it's genuinely shocking the first time you see it laid out. Here's the part almost nobody understands about a 30-year mortgage. In the early years, your payment is almost entirely interest. You send the bank $2,000 and maybe $300 or $400 of it actually goes toward what you owe. The rest is pure interest, gone. For the first several years of a 30-year loan, you are barely denting the actual balance. You feel like a homeowner, but you're really just renting money from the bank at a very high total cost. Diego, on his 30-year loan at a typical rate, will pay so much interest over those 3 decades that it can rival or even exceed the original price of the house itself. On a $300,000 loan, he could easily pay over $400,000 in interest alone. He buys the house once, but he pays for it more than twice. Now look at Hannah. Because her loan is shorter and her rate is lower, her total interest is a completely different universe. Where Diego pays north of $400,000 in interest, Hannah might pay under $150,000. Sit with that gap for a second. That's a difference of well over $200,000 kept in her pocket instead of shipped to a bank, just for choosing a different number on one line. That is not a rounding error. That's a second house. That's a fully funded retirement. That's a decade of somebody's salary, and on top of that mountain of saved interest, Hannah gets something Diego won't have for another 15 years. A house she owns, free and clear, with no payment at all. Her 40s or 50s arrive with zero mortgage, while Diego is still writing that check every single month. On raw interest, it is not remotely close. Hannah wins, and she wins enormous. And if the video ended right here, the lesson would be obvious. Always take the 15. But the video does not end here because that comparison quietly ignored something, and this is where the math flips for the first time. Here's Diego's counter-argument, and it's a genuinely good one, so give it real weight. Diego's monthly payment is $500 or $600 lower than Hannah's. That's $500 or $600 every single month that Hannah is pouring into her house and Diego is not. And what does Diego do with it? He invests it. Every month, he takes that difference and puts it straight into a low-cost index fund. And here's the thing about his mortgage. If his rate is relatively low, then the stock market, which has historically returned around 10% a year over the long run, can earn him more than his mortgage is costing him. So Diego makes a cold, rational bet. Why would I rush to pay off a loan that costs me, say, 6 or 7% when that same money could be growing at a historically higher rate somewhere else? And over 30 years, that invested difference doesn't just add up, it compounds into a genuinely huge number, potentially many hundreds of thousands of dollars. So Diego turns to Hannah and says, "Sure, you saved 200,000 in interest, but I built more than that in the market, and I had a smaller payment the whole time. And on paper, when mortgage rates are low, he can absolutely be right. There's your first flip. The 15 year saves the interest, but the 30-year invested well can quietly win the wealth race. So the 30-year wins? Not so fast. Because now watch the math flip a second time. And this is the part the invest the difference crowd almost always forgets. And it's a big one. Yes, for the first 15 years, Diego is investing $500 a month more than Hannah. But what happens in year 16? Hannah's mortgage is gone, completely paid off. Which means for the next 15 years, Hannah isn't investing a measly $500 a month. She's investing her entire former mortgage payment, $2,500 or more, every single month into that same index fund, with no house payment holding her back. Diego, meanwhile, is still making his mortgage payment all the way to year 30. So Diego gets a head start on investing, but Hannah gets a monster of a finish, throwing 5 times as much into the market for the back half of the race. And when you actually run those two paths side by side, the gap Diego built in the early years often gets caught and sometimes completely erased by Hannah's enormous catch-up in the later years. The race is far, far closer than the 30-year crowd wants to admit. And which one actually wins comes down to just a few specific things. So let me say it plainly. Flip 1, the 30-year can win by investing early. Flip 2, the 15-year catches right back up by investing huge in the back half. This is a real race, not a blowout. So let's name them because this is the real decision underneath all the noise. The first factor is the rate gap. How much lower is the 15-year rate compared to the 30? The bigger that gap, the more the 15-year pulls ahead, because Hannah's guaranteed savings get bigger while Diego's borrowed money gets more expensive. The second factor, and this is the one that quietly decides most real-world cases, is discipline. Diego's entire argument depends on him actually investing that difference. Every month. For 30 years. Without fail. And let's be brutally honest about human beings here. Most people do not do that. They take the smaller payment, they feel a little richer, and that extra $500 quietly dissolves into nicer dinners and a bigger car. And a 30-year mortgage where the difference got spent instead of invested is just a worse 15-year mortgage that cost you an extra $200,000 in interest for nothing. Hannah's plan, on the other hand, is automatic. The forced higher payment means she builds wealth whether she feels disciplined that month or not. The bank makes her do it. Automatic beats optimal when optimal never actually happens. But here is the single most underrated point in this entire debate, and it is the 30 years secret weapon, so pay close attention. It's flexibility. When Hannah signed that 15-year loan, she didn't just choose a faster payoff, she locked herself into a higher required payment for 15 straight years, no matter what happens in her life. Diego did the opposite. His required payment is low, but nothing stops him from paying more whenever he wants. And this is the key. Diego can choose to pay his 30-year loan on a 15-year schedule any month he likes, and knock it out just as fast as Hannah. But if he loses his job, or a medical bill lands, or the roof caves in, he can drop back down to his low required payment and breathe. Hannah cannot. Her high payment is mandatory, in good times and in disasters. So the 30-year quietly buys you something the 15-year never can. Options, a safety valve. The freedom to attack the loan when times are good and to duck when they're not. Think about which one you'd rather hold in a recession. A high payment you are locked into, or a low one you can choose to go beyond. In a real crisis, flexibility isn't a luxury, it's oxygen. Which leads to the strategy that, for a lot of people, genuinely beats both. Take the 30-year mortgage and then voluntarily pay it like a 15. You send extra principal every month on your own schedule, and you can pay the whole thing off just as fast as Hannah while capturing most of those interest savings. But if life ever punches you in the face, you have the legal right to fall back to that low required payment and survive. You get the speed of the 15 and the safety of the 30. The only two costs are that you'll pay the slightly higher 30-year interest rate. And once again, it demands real discipline because now nobody is forcing you. If you know yourself and you know that extra payment will actually happen, this hybrid is often the smartest move on the entire board. So, how do you actually decide? It really comes down to who you are. If you have rock solid income, you value flexibility, you have the discipline to invest or prepay on your own, and your rate is low, the 30-year gives you options and can win the wealth race. If your income is a little less certain, or you know deep down that you will spend the difference rather than invest it, or you simply crave the feeling of owning your home outright and sleeping like a baby, the 15-year forces a fantastic guaranteed outcome. And your stage of life matters enormously. A young high earner with decades ahead might rationally take the 30 and invest. Someone who wants to hit retirement with absolutely no mortgage payment hanging over them might sprint for the 15. Peace of mind is not a math error. For a lot of people, it is worth more than the last few percentage points of return. And before you do any of this, remember the order of operations because it beats this whole debate. Do not rush into a 15-year mortgage or throw extra money at a 30 if you are still skipping free money from your employer's retirement match or carrying credit card debt at 20+%, or living without an emergency fund. Grab the match, kill the high interest debt, build a cash cushion, and then, only then, come back and have this argument. A paid off house feels amazing, but not if you had to skip a 100% match and a 22% debt to get there. And to be clear, I'm not a licensed advisor, these numbers are illustrative. Mortgage rates move constantly, and market returns are never guaranteed. But the shape of this never changes, so the next time someone tells you the 15-year is always smarter or that the 30-year is always the better play, don't argue with them. Just ask them one question. What's the rate gap and will you actually invest the difference? Because those two answers and how much you value sleeping at night are the entire decision. Everything else is noise. So tell me in the comments, are you team 15 and own it fast, team 30 and invest the difference, or team pay a 30 like a 15? And what's your rate? And if this finally made the whole thing make sense, subscribe, because every week we run the real math on the money decisions everyone else just guesses at.